Threads of Love and Legacy. The Story of Serafina and Arcadio. Part 2. Arcadio. My mother's account of my grandfather's life is but a fragmented tapestry, woven from the threads of her childhood recollections. She was just a young girl when she listened intently to the stories he shared, his deep, commanding voice filling the room like a melody of days gone by. Yet, as years blurred the edges of those memories, much of his past remained an enigma to her, a mystery buried within the sands of time. What little she knew of Arcadio's childhood, however, was vivid and remarkable. His parents were among the fortunate first settlers in Quirino province, a place of promise and unclaimed lands. With bold determination, they had chosen a vast stretch of land to call their own, a property so expansive it was said to extend as far as their eyes could see. They became landlords of this abundant terrain, a status that afforded Arcadio and his 3 siblings a privileged upbringing. They grew up surrounded by everything they could ever wish for, a life of comfort, stability, and opportunities few could imagine during those times. She spoke of this with reverence, her voice carrying the echoes of a daughter's awe for a father whose life was both larger than she could comprehend and more fragile than she dared imagine. Arcadio's wistful sighs and faint, bittersweet smiles hinted at a deeper story, a life of privilege in childhood tempered by the complexities of adulthood. These glimpses painted a portrait of a man shaped by contrasts, abundance and responsibility, joy and nostalgia. And now, with those fragments she entrusted to me, I share his story, not as a complete chronicle, but as a tribute to a man whose essence lingers in the spaces between words, and whose spirit continues to light the paths of those who carry his name. The only photograph of my grandfather was lost in the fury of a typhoon 5 years ago. The waves of desperation that engulfed me that day were soon replaced by another kind of fear, the fear that his face, his smile, his spirit might one day fade from my memory. Yet even today, his figure remains etched in my mind, a treasure I never want to lose. His name was Arcadio San Juan, a distinguished man who stood out from the crowd. His face bore the traces of a mixed heritage. With Spanish and Filipino roots, he was often referred to as mestizo. My mother used to speak of him with warmth, and although I never had the chance to meet him, he always felt near. He passed away long before I drew my first breath. My mother painted a picture of a man who lived a life of wealth and respect. He was known as Don Arcadio, a title spoken with reverence. He owned land that stretched as far as the eye could see, a vast estate that was his pride. With his leather boots, an elegant hat perched on his head, and a cigar, his trusty suaco, in hand, he rode his horse through his domain like a king inspecting his kingdom. It was during one such ride, on an ordinary day, that Arcadio's life took an extraordinary turn. While passing by the market, his eyes fell upon a young woman who seemed to stand apart from everyone else. Her beauty was striking, radiant in a way that made the bustling crowd fade into the background. In that moment, something stirred in his heart, a feeling he had never known before. He realized, without question, that she was the one. Determined, he made every effort to win her heart. But for all his wealth and charm, the young woman turned him down. For the first time in his life, Arcadio could not simply reach out and take what he desired. It was humbling, and yet he found himself captivated by her strength, her independence. She was a challenge, unlike anyone he had ever encountered, and he knew in his soul that she was worth every effort. He persisted, undeterred by rejection, seeing her not as a prize to be claimed, but as someone he longed to share his life with. Fate intervened with the unexpected arrival of Japanese forces that colonized their province. The chaos and fragility of the times gave Arcadio the opportunity to break through the defenses of the woman he loved. Amid the uncertainty of war, he found her heart more vulnerable, and he stepped in, not with the power of wealth or charm, but with the promise of protection, stability, and companionship. Slowly, his unwavering persistence and earnest intentions began to chip away at her reservations. The very challenge that once humbled him now shaped him into a man who was willing to sacrifice his pride for love. Their love was blessed with children, 5 daughters who brought life and joy into their home. But for Arcadio, the absence of a son weighed heavily on his heart, casting a shadow over the blessings he had been given. With no successor to carry on his work and uphold the family's pride, a quiet bitterness began to take root within him. My mother remembered him as a kind yet conflicted man, whose sorrow for not having a son sometimes clouded his appreciation for the love and happiness surrounding him. On nights when the burden of his thoughts became too heavy, he often sought solace in a bottle of beer, his figure stumbling home under the weight of unspoken pain. Amid his sprawling agricultural lands, known as a plantation by the locals, stood his beloved rancho, a little paradise surrounded by fertile fields brimming with vegetables and fruit trees. Around the ranch, farm animals roamed freely. Buffaloes, cows, hens and roosters, ducks, pigs, and of course, his cherished horses. It was here, amidst the rhythm of life on the ranch, that he found fleeting moments of peace in his heart. But even there, the unfulfilled dream of a son remained a constant presence, a vulnerability that quietly shaped the man he had become. Then came the day a devastating typhoon struck. In an instant, it destroyed everything he had built. The plantation lay in ruins, and the beloved farm animals were lost to the cold grip of the flood. For Arcadio, this was more than just the loss of land. It was the loss of his passion, his drive, his identity. After the storm, Arcadio slowly withdrew from the man he had once been. The loss of his land and animals left a void in his heart, one he sought to fill with the company of a beer bottle and fleeting moments of camaraderie with his drinking friends. In his grief, he made impulsive decisions, gifting parts of his precious land to those he drank with, a choice that deeply upset my grandmother and added to the family's hardships. His refusal to allow his daughter's husbands to inherit the land fueled a quiet unrest within the family, creating subtle tensions that would shape their relationships in the years to come. As the years passed, the weight of his regrets became heavier, and Arcadio's once proud demeanor grew quieter, more contemplative. He began to reflect on the choices that had caused pain to those he loved most. His impulsiveness, his inability to fully express the love he felt for his family. Though his outward appearance remained dignified, his eyes often carried a softness that spoke of longing, a yearning to make things right before it was too late. In the final days of his life, as illness began to take hold, Arcadio found himself surrounded by the family he had sometimes struggled to connect with. The daughters who had tirelessly cared for him, and the grandchildren who had brought joy back into his home. Weak but determined, he gathered his strength to say the words he had carried in his heart for so long. With a trembling voice, he asked for their forgiveness. He admitted to the flaws that had clouded his judgment, the bitterness he had let seep into his soul. Tears streamed down his face as he assured them that his love for them had never wavered, even in the moments when his actions may have suggested otherwise. He spoke of the pride he felt in each of them, the gratitude for the care they had given him, and the hope that they would continue to carry his memory with kindness. Though his words were few, they were filled with profound emotion, a father's final attempt to mend the wounds of the past and leave behind a legacy of love. In that moment, the family saw not just a man burdened by sorrow, but a father who loved them deeply, a husband who cherished his wife, and a grandfather who had found solace in their presence. As Arcadio closed his eyes for the last time, a quiet peace settled over him. The family held him close, their hearts aching with both grief and newfound understanding. The memory of his vulnerability and his heartfelt apology became a lasting treasure, proof that beneath his complex exterior lay a man whose love endured until the very end. May he rest in peace.